What's up, guys? We're back, and today I'm gonna be going over an entire, March Madness recap. Of course, it's not over yet. We're at the Final Four right now, but the majority of it's over, and it's time, we can just look back and see what truly happened and kind of process it. So as usual, let's just get straight into it. Before we start, though, I would do say hit that like, subscribe button. You know, definitely help the channel grow out. But with that being said, let's get straight into it. Um, you know, this year, I feel like everyone kind of knew it was going to be pretty unpredictable, pretty crazy, but I don't think anyone predicted this crazy of a March Madness. You have the crazy upsets and, Fairleigh Dickinson beating Purdue. You have Princeton beating Arizona, and you have Furman beating Virginia. But I feel like most people, including myself, were predicting more of the more like overall upsets, like just more like quantity, like a larger quantity of upsets. You know, I, it was weird. No 12 seeds beat 5 seeds this year, which was definitely unusual. And then there was only one 13 over 4, which is pretty reasonable. And then of course you have the two ones that no one's gonna really predict: the 15 over 2 in Arizona, and then the 16 over 1. But other than that, I feel like there weren't many first round upsets. I mean, Pitt over Iowa State. Iowa State just played horrible that game. And I feel like people had either Pitt or Arizona State winning their first game because usually a first four team always wins, and that happened again this year. So yeah, Pitt got that win. But other than that, I wouldn't say there were any real upsets, or there were like that many upsets other than those main three of what we've already went over. Mainly the upsets happened later in the rounds. Of course, you have San Diego State making the Final Four, going on their crazy run. They had Charleston and Furman, two hard teams, but you know, kind of it was weird because everyone thought Alabama was just gonna run through this section right here, and then they match up against San Diego State, who I feel like would have probably been their toughest opponent, and it proved to be that, where San Diego State ended up winning. Um, great game from Darian Trammell and Lamont Butler. I think Lamont Butler had a better game here, but Mensa, crazy shot blocker. That was just an overall outstanding performance from San Diego State. Then down here, of course, Arizona losing in the first round made it easier for teams like Creighton to make a run. I think I did have Creighton going to the Elite Eight anyway, but just having Arizona knocked out in the first round definitely gave them an easier path. Baylor, still definitely a tough opponent. They were able to pull that one off, and then they beat Princeton in that Sweet 16. And of course, against San Diego State in the Elite Eight, it was a very controversial game. The last call, Ryan Nembhard fouled Darian Trammell, and they ended the game on free throws. And then no one really understands what fully happened at the very end of that game, with that whole out of bounds call and everything. With Baylor Shireman throwing the ball down the court and it bouncing off Kuluma or one of the San Diego State players' hands. It was just kind of a weird end to the game after a pretty bad second half where no one was making their shots. But it was still an overall good game, I would say. Definitely an entertaining back and forth game. The South region definitely proved to be unpredictable because most people had, either a 12 over 5 right here or they had Furman over Virginia. I thought that I had picked this matchup to happen where it was San Diego State and Furman, but then I went back and I realized I picked Virginia and Charleston deep down. I think in the first bracket that I created outside of that YouTube one, the one that I posted, obviously, which was my like a first official one. But I filled out like 3 or 4 more just to have a little bit of variety, and um, I felt more confident in San Diego State winning and then Furman getting an upset, and that ended up happening. So that was definitely interesting. And then let's just check out the East. Definitely one of the crazier regions right here. It was not as upset heavy as I believed it might have been. Actually, the upsets here I feel like weren't. It was really just Oral Roberts maybe making a run, or you could have Providence maybe beating Kentucky, but neither of those ended up happening. But obviously, you have the 16 seed Fairleigh Dickinson beating Purdue. You know, only happened twice. This is the second time it happened. 16 over 1. definitely an amazing game to watch. Fairleigh Dickinson and Tobin Anderson. Tobin Anderson now has a job at Iona. Definitely great to see. And then the Memphis FAU game, the game that made me very, very upset as I had Memphis going on a run. And then just to see FAU going on the run that I thought Memphis could have done definitely makes it even more upsetting. But FAU did win the game. They got the last second shot. And there were some questionable calls at the end of the game. But I feel like that can be said for most close games. Just depending on who you're rooting for, I was going to say that there have been some questionable calls. And then, Fairleigh Dickinson versus FAU. FAU was able to hold off Fairleigh Dickinson and keep them from doing something historic. And then, Duke, Tennessee. I thought Duke maybe would have went on a little bit of a further of a run because I didn't really have that much faith in Tennessee. They barely pulled away from Louisiana, but then they had a very solid showing against Duke. Olivier Kamwa, he had a great game right here against Duke. He definitely has a couple more years left. I think he's a junior right now, so I think he has 2 years left, and I don't know if he's transferring or not. I feel like he would benefit from either transferring and maybe getting like a lead position or just sticking with the Tennessee program. And then, they play FAU, and FAU surprises everyone and wins that one. And down here, you have chalk, Kentucky, Kansas State, Michigan State, Marquette. And then a lot of people had this Kentucky over Kansas State upset just because they didn't feel too confident in Kansas State. And I don't fault them for that. I had that Kentucky over Kansas State upset. I just thought Tshiebwe was going to be more dominant, as well as Cason Wallace and Antonio Reeves just being able to hit their shots. Just didn't fully happen as well as it could have. Kansas State was able to get that done. Marquise Noel had probably the best single player performances of this entire tournament. I'd say he was probably the best player. He had the most exciting performances of any player in this tournament. So that was definitely a good run to watch. Sad that it ended in the Elite Eight, but at least they got there. And then, Michigan State upsetting Marquette. Definitely an interesting upset right here. Tyson Walker obviously had just a great overall tournament, as well as AJ Hoggard, Joey Hauser. They just had a good, solid team this year. Tom Izzo, he's one of the best coaches in the entire college basketball right now. And Marquette just wasn't able to get it done, man. Kolek, he kind of underperformed in this game, and it definitely hurt him in the end. And then this was probably one of the best games of the entire tournament. Kansas State versus Michigan State. Went to overtime. Marquise Noel, I believe this is the game where he had around, 20 points and 19 assists, which broke a all-time assist record in March Madness. Definitely a crazy game. And then FAU ended up beating Kansas State to make their first ever Final Four. Definitely very interesting and crazy. Then over in the West, this was a completely chalk region, and it went the way that a lot of people did have it kind of going without this Arkansas-Kansas upset. I did believe that if Memphis was, I had Memphis over Purdue in this round, but neither of those teams even made it that far. But a 9 seed, FAU did end up winning that anyway. But I had said if that wasn't to happen, which it did, I would go with the Arkansas over Kansas upset, which did happen. You had Ricky Council having a solid game, as well as Anthony Black. They just had all their guards playing solid, but then Devontae Davis obviously had his breakout game, where he definitely showed out while the others were struggling at times and was able to lead those guys to a win. Sucks that UConn dominated them in the next round, but at least they got there. It was just an all-around kind of, I wouldn't say boring, but pretty basic region over here. It was chalk, and then you have an 8-1 upset, which is always nice to see. And then UCLA beat Northwestern barely. They just barely pulled out from that one, as well as the same with Gonzaga, barely beating TCU. And then UConn was able to hold off St. Mary's. UConn just been having an amazing run. I feel like right now they're definitely the championship favorites. They're my personal championship pick, even though I'd probably rather see a team like Miami or San Diego State win, just because, first time champ. But it would be cool to see Dan Hurley get a ring, or to get a championship, as well as all the guys on this team that have never won before. This game, UCLA Gonzaga, definitely probably one of my best games of the entire tournament. You have UCLA, who has a very good game. Jaime Jaquez, Tiger Campbell. They did suffer. Adam Bona was in and out of the rotation throughout all these games, and I believe he sat out this entire game, which definitely hurt them in the long run. But they just weren't able to get it done. Came down to the last second. Amari Bailey hit that clutch 3 to tie it. But then out of the timeout, I was expecting them to kind of at least run down the clock a little more, but Gonzaga just came out. Julian Strother pulled up and hit that deep 3 to nail it. That's definitely going to go down as one of the better shots in college basketball history. Just one of the best game winners of all time, I would say. Julian Strother definitely made an impact, and then this game just completely crushed Gonzaga and all their hopes. Man, UConn that second half was embarrassing for Gonzaga. None of them were able to get anything going. Drew Timme was in foul trouble, so they kept him out longer than they probably would have wanted. And then no one was able to get Gonzaga going, while UConn was just hitting everything. You have Jordan Hawkins going off. You have Calcaterra. He was a little bit of a spark plug off the bench. He didn't do anything like amazing, but he hit a couple good threes, good impact threes. And yeah, the West region was definitely one of the more entertaining ones, although it was mainly chalk. It was definitely cool to see. Then you have the Midwest region, which again, no crazy upsets here. You have the 5-4 Miami, Indiana. You have Houston and Auburn. Pitt was only like team that maybe went on a little bit of they got an upset over Iowa State. That is definitely something that happened. And then the underwhelming game, Texas A&M, Penn State. I definitely had higher hopes for this game, hoping Texas A&M would be able to at least put on a little bit of a run to maybe get back in the game, but Penn State just had that on lock. Andrew Funk had an amazing first round. He was a sniper down from 3. He I think, he had like 20, maybe 22 points or something like that. Definitely made an impact. And the way that Penn State plays, man, they definitely were could have went on a run if they went against any other team other than Texas in the second round. Texas had a very good run. Really love that team, man. Sucks to see them lose, but if they were to lose in anyone in this region, I would probably want it to be Miami, because I do also really like this Miami team. Just beating Houston alone is amazing, because Houston, Marcus Sasser, Jamal Shed, Jarace Walker, Juwan Roberts, that starting 5 is deadly, and then they have options out the bench. And Miami was able to get it done, man. Nigel Pack had an amazing Sweet 16 game. He had, I think, 7 threes. And Isaiah Wong just has been an all-around great player the entire tournament, as well as Norchad Omier, probably one of the most impactful players, I would say, in the entire tournament. He has one of the weirdest impacts on the game where you can't really see it when you're watching the game, but you can definitely feel it, that once he's in the game, the tide shifts and Miami starts going on runs. That's what happened against Texas. I feel like he was out for a while. You had the 4 fouls, so they had to take him out. And Texas went on a little bit of a run. They had some highlight plays with Dylan Mitchell catching lobs. And then right when they put Norchad Omier in, man, the tide shifted and Miami started going on a run, and they came back from down 13. Of course, rooting for Texas, I was upset when that happened, but looking back on it, Miami just had a great game, and sucks to see of course, one of your teams losing, but again, I'm glad that Miami was the team to beat them. And Indiana, Trayce Jackson-Davis had a good tournament, I would say. Just sucks that they couldn't really get anything together, and they ran into the Miami team that was destined, and now they're in the Final Four. And then Xavier had a little bit of a solid run of games, beating Pitt. I think they were up like a lot more at first in that game. But then Pitt started kind of coming back, but Xavier was in the end able to hold them off. And then against Texas, they just couldn't really get anything going. This was definitely a interesting game. But yeah, now the Final Four of San Diego State, FAU, UConn, and Miami. Definitely one of the most unpredictable. Having no one seeds make it to the Elite Eight even. Like both Houston and Alabama losing in the Sweet 16. And Purdue lost the first round. Kansas lost in the second round. It's just crazy to see. FAU obviously going on their kind of Cinderella run. UConn going on their dominant run. And then Miami and San Diego State both pulling off some great upsets. My personal picks are UConn moving on. And then San Diego State, I would say, probably beats FAU. So I have UConn versus San Diego State. And then UConn winning. But a lot of people like this FAU Miami matchup that could potentially happen, and I'm down for that too. Honestly, any way this goes, I'm not gonna be mad about it. I would personally rather have one of these teams win, just because I like the way that these guys play, and they've been more intriguing teams, and I've had more faith in them just throughout the regular season. I did believe in Miami. I don't really know why I picked Drake over them. I just kind of fell in love with the 12 over 5 and kind of got a little crazy over my head with that. Because now that I'm seeing them go on a Final Four run, I'm going to say that I did definitely believe in them. But I did truly like them. I had them winning that ACC tournament and when I did those conference tournament predictions. And I believe that they could have went on a run in March Madness. I didn't think they would get this far. But they made the Elite Eight last year. I feel like they probably could make the Sweet 16 this year. I probably would have had them losing to Houston, realistically. But yeah, that is just how the bracket's been going. Now let's take a look at my bracket. I thought that I'd pick San Diego State Furman, but looking back on it, I obviously picked Charleston, Virginia. Definitely did not happen. San Diego State made it to the Final Four. I had them losing in the first round. Maryland, West Virginia. That just 8-9 matchups. You're always gonna mess those up. I could have swore I picked Auburn here, but I guess I went with Iowa. I liked Chris Murray, but they just weren't able to pull that one off. Of course, I had Arizona going to the Sweet 16. They get upset. I did have Purdue losing early. Had them losing to Memphis though, and then FAU was the team that ended up going on that run. This entire region, I just did not do well in. I picked these games right, where it was Marquette versus Michigan State, Kansas State, Kentucky, Tennessee, Duke. But I just picked the wrong winner for all of them. It's definitely not great. And then over here, I got most of these games right, but I feel like a lot of people did do the best in the West region. TCU, Arizona State, I just like this Arizona State team, and it's one of my, home teams, so I kind of just threw in that as a personal bias pick. Realistically, I do feel that TCU is the better team. This was a very interesting game, though. Came down to the wire. Jacoby Coles hit that game-winning layup. There was a couple highlight plays by Arizona State. I believe Frankie Collins posterized someone in that game. He definitely has a future. I might not say he's going to go to the NBA, but a couple years a couple more years in college, and he can develop into a great all-around point guard, especially under Bobby Hurley. And then I had Kansas beating Arkansas. Obviously, that didn't happen. Elite Eight teams that I had that I picked correctly going to the Elite Eight, I did have Creighton, did have Texas, and then I had this UConn-Gonzaga matchup. But then, of course, San Diego State and Miami beat both Creighton and Texas when I had Alabama winning and Texas. So, it was okay at best. It was pretty bad, but I feel like no one really had a great bracket this year. With that Final Four, you can't really have an amazing bracket. It's just pretty unpredictable, I would say. But yeah, that is the March Madness recap. And my Final Four picks, have San Diego State winning, then UConn winning, with UConn coming out as the national champion. And that is all for today. like, subscribe again if you feel like it, and I will see you guys later.